Hello, everybody. Thank you all for being here today. It's a privilege to speak with you, and I hope what I share will provide you with insight and perhaps a little clarity on how to navigate this chaotic world without succumbing to anger and frustration. Now, let's dive right into the matter at hand, this idea of how to never get angry or bothered by anyone. First of all, let's not misunderstand the situation. Anger itself is not inherently evil. It's a signal from your nervous system. It's there for a reason. When used properly, it can be a tool for asserting boundaries and defending yourself or others against injustice. But we need to carefully distinguish between justified responses and a habitual state of being disturbed by the world. You see, many people walk around angry without knowing why, and worse, they assume their anger is entirely the fault of external circumstances, as though they're puppets being pulled on strings by the people around them. But that's a profoundly dangerous way to live. Why? Because when you believe that your emotional state is under the control of everyone else, you become a perpetual victim. And I'll tell you this, there are few things more debilitating than perceiving yourself as a victim with no agency. So let's talk about mastering your reactions. Imagine this, you're walking through your day and someone cuts you off in traffic. What's your immediate response? Most people will feel that flash of irritation. Maybe they swear, maybe they hit the horn, maybe they carry that frustration into their next conversation at work or at home. And what's really happened here? One small event, something completely out of your control, has hijacked your emotional state. What's the alternative? Well, instead of reacting impulsively, you take a step back mentally. You pause. You remind yourself that you always have a choice. That's the key phrase, you always have a choice. And that choice is this: will I let this moment dominate my consciousness, or will I acknowledge it and move forward without being consumed by it? But here's the thing, you don't just wake up one day and suddenly become a master of your reactions. It takes practice, it takes awareness. One useful strategy is to ask yourself in those moments of irritation, is this worth the energy it's about to cost me? And more often than not, you'll find that the answer is a resounding no. The reason this is so powerful is that anger and frustration are extremely expensive emotions. They cost you peace of mind. They cost you time because you waste mental energy replaying scenarios and imagining confrontations that never happen. And worst of all, they cost you your clarity of thought. When you're angry, you're not thinking clearly. You're reactive. And when you're reactive, you're much more likely to make bad decisions. So what does mastery of reactions look like in practice? It starts with cultivating self-awareness. Pay attention to what triggers you. Is it a certain tone of voice? Is feeling dismissed or ignored? Whatever it is, identify it, because once you know what your triggers are, you can start to create that crucial mental space between stimulus and response. And in that space lies your power, the power to choose your response rather than simply reacting. This brings me to a related and equally important point: stop taking things personally. Now, I know that's easier said than done. We're social creatures, and we naturally care about how we're perceived by others. That's a good thing to some extent because it helps us navigate social situations and maintain relationships. But when you're constantly interpreting other people's actions and words as a reflection of your worth, you're setting yourself up for a lot of unnecessary suffering. Let me give you an example. Imagine you're at work and your boss criticizes your performance during a meeting. Many people's first reaction would be to feel hurt, maybe even humiliated. They'll go home and replay the situation over and over in their minds, thinking, why did he say that? Doesn't he appreciate what I've been doing? And before you know it, that one comment has ruined their entire day, maybe even their week. But here's what you need to understand: most of the time, other people's behavior has very little to do with you and everything to do with them. Your boss might be stressed out because of a project deadline. He might be dealing with personal issues that have nothing to do with you. Or maybe he's just not a particularly tactful communicator. The point is, his criticism is not necessarily a reflection of your value as an employee or a person. And even when criticism is valid, it's important to separate the message from the delivery. Ask yourself, is there something useful I can take from this feedback? If the answer is yes, great, use it to improve. If the answer is no, let it go. Don't carry it around with you like emotional baggage. I'll tell you something else that's worth keeping in mind. People often project their own insecurities onto others. If someone is constantly belittling you or trying to make you feel small, it's usually because they feel inadequate in some way. They're trying to bring you down to their level so they can feel better about themselves. But here's the thing, you don't have to participate in that dynamic. You can choose to rise above it. A practical way to stop taking things personally is to develop what I call psychological distance. This means stepping back from a situation and observing it objectively, almost as though you're an outsider looking in. Instead of thinking, why is this person doing this to me? Ask yourself, what might be going on in their world that's causing them to act this way? This shift in perspective can be incredibly liberating because it reminds you that other people's behavior is not about you, it's about them. And finally, remember this, when you stop taking things personally, you reclaim your power. You stop being a puppet on strings, controlled by other people's opinions and actions. Instead, you become the master of your own emotional state. And that, my friends, is a freedom worth striving for. Ladies and gentlemen, let me tell you something crucial about the way you navigate life. Something that many people never fully grasp, yet it holds the key to maintaining composure and strength even in the face of chaos. And it's this: you have to build emotional immunity. What do I mean by that? I'll tell you. Emotional immunity is the ability to withstand the inevitable slights, criticisms, frustrations, and unfair moments that life will throw at you without being knocked off course. And let's be clear, life will throw these things at you. People will gossip about you, misunderstand your intentions, undermine your work, and sometimes flat out insult you. It's inevitable. The question is, what are you going to do about it? Are you going to crumble every time someone says something unpleasant, or are you going to learn how to be the type of person who isn't easily thrown off by nonsense? Now, the first things I want you to understand is that being emotionally fragile is not a virtue. Now, we're in a time where many people mistakenly believe that feeling deeply hurt by every perceived slight makes you morally superior or more empathetic, but that's just not true. In fact, it's dangerous. Why? Because if you're perpetually fragile, you become a victim of circumstance. You hand over control of your emotional state to every person who crosses your path, giving them power over your life. So how do you develop emotional immunity? You have to start by recognizing that your feelings, your reactions are your responsibility. No one can make you feel anything without your cooperation. Now, that's a difficult pill for many people to swallow because it's much easier to blame other people for how you feel. He made me angry. She ruined my day. But the truth is, no one has that kind of power over you unless you let them. When someone criticizes you unfairly or makes a snide comment, what are they really doing? They're revealing something about themselves. People who lash out or belittle others are often dealing with their own insecurities or frustrations. They project their issues onto others because it's easier than facing their own inadequacies. Understanding this simple truth can fundamentally change how you respond to negativity. Let me give you an example. Imagine you're at work and a colleague publicly criticizes your presentation. Your immediate reaction might be embarrassment, followed by anger. You might think, why is this person attacking me? But if you take a step back, you might realize that their criticism had nothing to do with you. Maybe they're feeling insecure because their own work hasn't been well received, and tearing you down temporarily makes them feel better. Or maybe they simply lack the social skills to offer constructive feedback. Either way, their behavior is about them, not you. Here's where emotional immunity comes in. Instead of reacting emotionally and escalating the situation, you maintain your composure. You recognize that their words don't define your worth or the value of your work. You choose not to be offended because you understand that their behavior is a reflection of their inner struggles, not a reflection of your capabilities. Now, I'm not saying that you should never stand up for yourself or address issues when necessary. Emotional immunity doesn't mean becoming a doormat. It means being strategic and intentional about how you respond. Instead of lashing out or getting defensive, you respond with clarity and confidence. You say, "Thank you for your feedback. I'll take it into consideration." That's it. Simple, calm, and professional. The next point I want to make is about expectation management. One of the reasons people get upset so easily is because they have unrealistic expectations about how others should behave. They think people should always be kind, they should always be fair, they should always respect me. But that's not reality. People are flawed, they have bad days, they make mistakes, and sometimes they're just plain rude. When you expect perfection from others, you set yourself up for constant disappointment and frustration. But when you accept that people are imperfect, that they will sometimes say and do things that are hurtful or unfair, you become much harder to rattle. You develop a sense of psychological flexibility that allows you to roll with the punches instead of being knocked down by every little thing. Another critical aspect of building emotional immunity is learning how to distinguish between constructive criticism and destructive criticism. Not all negative feedback is bad. In fact, some of it can be incredibly valuable, but you have to develop the discernment to tell the difference. Constructive criticism comes from people who genuinely want to help you improve. It might be tough to hear, but it's offered with good intentions. Destructive criticism, on the other hand, is meant to tear you down. It's often rooted in envy, insecurity, or malice. When you receive feedback, ask yourself, is this person offering insight that can help me grow? If the answer is yes, take it to heart and use it to get better. If the answer is no, let it go. Don't waste your energy dwelling on negativity that serves no purpose. Let me tell you something else about emotional immunity. It requires practice. You don't wake up one day and suddenly become immune to negativity. It's a skill you develop over time, just like physical immunity builds up through exposure to various elements. Every time you choose not to react emotionally to a negative situation, you strengthen your emotional resilience, and over time, it becomes second nature. One practical technique I recommend is reframing. Reframing is the process of changing the way you perceive a situation to alter your emotional response to it. Let's say someone cuts you off in traffic. Your initial reaction might be anger. What a jerk! They have no respect for anyone else on the road. But if you reframe the situation, you might think, maybe they're rushing to the hospital to see a loved one. Now, whether that's true or not doesn't really matter. What matters is that by reframing the situation, you diffuse your own anger and maintain your peace of mind. Another technique is mindfulness. Mindfulness involves staying present in the moment without judgment. When you practice mindfulness, you become more aware of your thoughts and emotions without being controlled by them. Instead of reacting impulsively to a negative comment, you observe your feelings and let them pass without getting caught up in them. It's like watching clouds drift across the sky. They come and go, but they don't define the sky itself. One of the biggest obstacles to emotional immunity is ego. The ego wants to be right, it wants to be praised and validated, and when it doesn't get what it wants, it throws a tantrum. But here's the thing, your ego is not your friend. It's a trap. The more you feed it, the more fragile and reactive you become. To overcome this, you have to learn humility. Humility doesn't mean thinking less of yourself. It means thinking of yourself less. When you let go of the need for constant validation and recognition, you become much harder to offend. You realize that your worth isn't determined by other people's opinions. It comes from within. So, to build emotional immunity, you need to take responsibility for your reactions, manage your expectations, distinguish between constructive and destructive criticism, practice reframing and mindfulness, and let go of your ego. These are not easy tasks, but they are essential if you want to live a life of strength, composure, and inner peace. Remember, emotional immunity is not about never feeling hurt or upset. It's about developing the resilience to handle those feelings in a healthy, constructive way. It's about becoming the type of person who isn't easily shaken by the inevitable challenges and difficulties of life,